Every time Brian and Stewie time traveled in Family Guy. Family Guy has sent the Griffin family on plenty of wild adventures, and Stewie and Brian time traveling is a running gag in the show. In today's video, we take a look at the times when Stewie and Brian have time traveled. Stay tuned and watch. The Road to Germany. The first time travel adventure that Stewie and Brian go on in Family Guy came during Season 7, Episode 3, Road to Germany. The episode begins with Mort Goldman stumbling into Stewie's time machine while at Griffin's house after mistaking it for a bathroom. Stewie and Brian decide that they need to follow Mort to the past to bring him back. This takes them to 1939 Germany at the precipice of World War II. They quickly find Mort but realize that the return pad is broken. Brian, Mort, and Stewie travel to England while being pursued by Nazis to obtain more uranium fuel, which powers these versions of the return pad. They manage to get the uranium after Stewie poses as Hitler and returns home safely, 30 seconds before Mort originally enters Stewie's room. To ensure these events don't repeat themselves though, Stewie kills the Mort who traveled through time by putting him in the time machines and blowing it up. The Big Bang Theory. Stewie and Brian's next time travel adventures took place in Family Guy Season 9, Episode 6, titled The Big Bang Theory. The episode is in a crossover with a hit TBS sitcom of the same name, but instead it is a story about Stewie nearly being erased from the universe. It begins with Stewie using the time machines to make fun of Brian, leading the two pals fighting over control of it. This takes them outside the space-time continuum, and Stewie discovered that he created the universe with a Big Bang. After returning to the right point in time, Stewie's half-brother Bertram decides to use the time machines to erase Stewie from existence. This forces Stewie and Brian to go back in time again to try and stop him, resulting in Stewie learning that Leonardo da Vinci is his ancestor. Through a twisted turn of events, Stewie has to kill Bertram and become his own ancestor before returning to the present day. Back to the pilot. Family Guy Season 10, Episode 5, Back to the Pilot sees Brian and Stewie takes a very different trip through time. It begins with Brian wishing he could find a tennis ball he buried 10 years before, and Stewie offering to take his dog companion back in time to figure out where it is. This takes them back to the pilot episodes of Family Guy, but Stewie and Brian mess up the timeline when Brian tells his past self about 9/11. The chain reactions of events that occurred from these details brings the US into a post-apocalyptic state in the near future. Brian and Stewie go back in time once more to try and fix the timeline. This didn't work at first either, as Brian became the author of the Harry Potter books instead. The duo goes back in time again and encounters multiple versions of themselves from different futures. It only ends once the original Stewie prevents him and Brian from ever going back in time in the first place. Yuklimov. The next time travel adventures with Brian and Stewie takes place in Family Guy Season 11, Episode 4, Yuklimov. It begins with Brian using Stewie's time machines to pick up women and unknowingly increasing the trip counter. He tries to reduce the counter but breaks the machines in the process. When he and Stewie tries to fix it, the machine explodes and causes times around them to begin moving backward at exponential speeds. They race against a ticking clock to fix the flow of time before Stewie becomes unborn. Stewie runs out of time as his birth nears and tasks Brian with finishing the repairs. Brian manages to fix the time machines and the flow of time, and he arrives at the hospital just as Stewie is born again. Life of Brian. Family Guy Season 12, Episode 6, Life of Brian is one of the show's most memorable because it is the episode where Brian dies. The episode begins with him and Stewie on the other time travel adventure though. They return to Jamestown after a previous adventure saw them give Native Americans guns to protect themselves. Once the original versions of Stewie and Brian leave, the new ones approach the Native Americans and take back the guns. They then return to the present day and destroy the time machines after having too many near-death experiences. Unfortunately, Brian is hit by a car not too long after, and Stewie is unable to go back in time to prevent this from happening or rebuild the time machine. Christmas Guy. The next time travel adventures in Family Guy comes just 2 episodes later. It technically doesn't see Brian join Stewie on the trip to the past, but the dog is an integral part of the plot nonetheless. Stewie is at the mall meeting Santa when he sees another version of himself from before Brian's death at the store. He gets the idea to take Stewie's return pad so that he can go back in time and save Brian. Stewie successfully goes back in time and saves Brian from being hit by the car. Stewie then sends the return pad to the present and fades from existence after altering the timeline. Stewie, Chris, and Brian's excellent adventure. The most recent time travel adventures between Stewie and Brian in Family Guy came in season 13, episode 7, titled Stewie, Chris, and Brian's Excellent Adventure. The episode revolves around Chris being on the verge of failing the 9th grade unless he can pass his upcoming history test. Stewie and Brian eventually try to help Chris study and realize that normal studying techniques will not work for him. They later take Chris on a trip throughout history that allows him to learn about Louisiana Purchase, meet Ernest Hemingway, and board the Titanic. While Chris didn't retain any knowledge from this adventure, it did result in the death of an ancestor of his history teacher, giving him a new one who doesn't care as much about grades. That brings us to the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching.